Let me first, as usual, pay a vibrant tribute to our defense and security forces, to all the actors on the ground, VDP, civilian population, Corps Luero, Doso, all committed to freeing Burkina from the terrorism imposed on us. Therefore, we pay homage to them and extend all our encouragement for them to stay more committed to a certain victory. Indeed, this morning we proceeded at the graduation ceremony of the 22 student pilot officers whom we appointed as second lieutenants to strengthen the operational capacities of the Air Force. As you know, the aerial vector, the air component, is an essential component in war, whether asymmetrical or conventional. Those who regularly follow the news on television see what the actors of the air forces do on the ground. They are said to be invisible forces, but they deliver great results and significantly support our options on the ground. Indeed, the Air Force and its air support component strikes, fire support to man on the ground, the transport component, the medical evacuation component is crucial. And we take this opportunity to thank the government as a whole, and more particularly Captain Ibrahim Traoré, head of state, President of Faso, the supreme leader of the armed forces, who committed to making the Burkinabe Air Forces a flagship and model and the most powerful force in the sub-region. And I think that 22 pilots trained at once, this is the first time we have seen this in the history of the National Armed Forces. And it's a very strong signal of the military's growing strength that continues, and which will result in significant outcomes on the ground through the...
What we just heard was not just a speech, it was a declaration, a call to history, a bold, unshakable message to enemies both seen and unseen, that Burkina Faso is no longer asking for security. It is building it, with its own hands, its own blood, and now, its own wings. On this day, 22 new pilots, trained, uniformed, and ready, officially took their place in the skies of Burkina Faso, and in doing so, they wrote a new chapter in the nation's military legacy, one that doesn't just mark a tactical achievement, but an ideological one. Because in a country battling an asymmetric war imposed from outside, the act of producing 22 combat-ready pilots in one training cycle is nothing short of revolutionary. Let's pause for a moment and truly absorb the gravity of that. For the first time in the history of Burkina Faso's armed forces, 22 officers were trained and graduated as pilots in a single cohort. This is unprecedented. As the Minister of State for Defense, General Célestin Simporé, put it, "C'est la première fois qu'on voit ça dans l'histoire des forces armées nationales." That line is more than ceremonial, it's historical. Because military transformation on this scale does not happen by accident. It happens when a nation is pushed to the edge and decides it will no longer fall. When a people resolve to take control of their skies not just to fly, but to fight, protect, and lead. The context of this moment cannot be ignored. Burkina Faso is at war, not a conventional war of borders and uniforms, but a war of shadows, ambushes, and ideology. A war imposed by terror networks, backed and funded by enemies' interests, who never wanted Burkina Faso to rise. But rise it has. Because what does it mean when a country that, just a few years ago, relied heavily on foreign assistance for air support, now trains and commissions its own pilots, at scale? It means independence. It means strategy. It means sovereignty with wings. General Simporé's words were clear and unwavering. He began with a tribute, a vibrant homage, to all forces on the ground. The Army, the VDPs, volunteers for the defense of the homeland, the traditional Dozos, and everyday civilians. Everyone fighting to reclaim the nation's dignity from the grip of imposed terror. This was not political flattery. It was recognition of a people's collective resistance. He reminded the world that this war is not one Burkina Faso chose. It was imposed. But the country is choosing how it will respond, with unity, strength, and innovation. And now with altitude. The ceremony where these 22 pilots received their official ranks was more than a graduation. It was a tactical rearmament. As the minister emphasized, the aerial component of warfare, especially in asymmetrical combat, is vital. In modern combat, especially against guerrilla insurgents who vanish into forests and deserts, aerial superiority can be a game changer. With intelligence surveillance, airstrikes, emergency medical evacuations, and logistics transport, a strong air force can dictate the tempo of war. And Burkina Faso is now laying that foundation. Some may ask, what does this mean for the war effort? The answer is simple: it transforms it. No longer must ground forces wait for external support. No longer must military operations be delayed for lack of air cover or reconnaissance. These 22 new pilots represent 22 force multipliers, each capable of turning the tide of a battle from the sky. But even beyond tactics, there's something deeper here, something symbolic. This achievement tells every Burkinabe child, every African youth, that our skies can belong to us. That we do not have to depend on Western air forces or imported contractors. That African nations can train aviators, command fleets, and dominate airspace with indigenous capacity and national vision. In his speech, the general did not forget to thank the man many see as the architect of this transformation, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the president of the transition and supreme commander of the armed forces. His commitment to building a robust, sovereign Burkinabe Air Force has never been in doubt. Simporé said, "Nous profitons de l'occasion pour remercier le gouvernement, et plus particulièrement le capitaine Ibrahim Traoré, qui s'est engagé à ce que les forces aériennes burkinabè deviennent la plus puissante force de la sous-région." This is a massive ambition, not to be functional, not even to be strong, but to be the most powerful air force in the region. For a landlocked nation often underestimated by global players, that kind of ambition can only come from clarity of purpose. And clearly that purpose is self-liberation. In the middle of this historic moment, allow us to pause and thank you, our subscribers, followers, and Pan-African brothers and sisters who continue to support this platform. Your engagement, your likes, comments, and shares keep this vision alive. If you believe in a strong, sovereign Africa, help us spread this message. Leave a comment, share this story, and hit the subscribe button to keep the revolution visible. Now let's reflect again on what these pilots represent. Each of these 22 officers is more than a soldier. They are symbols of a new Burkina Faso. A Burkina Faso that's no longer content with being a client state in its own territory. A Burkina Faso that builds, trains, and equips its own sons and daughters for liberation, not in service of foreign powers, but for its own survival and glory. These young officers will carry out missions that are as psychological as they are military. Their flights above the Sahel, the forests of the east, or the mines of the north will not just deliver bombs or supplies, they'll deliver hope. Hope to the people on the ground that their government is present, that their protection is real, and that the future is taking shape in real time. But this also raises a larger question. What comes next? Because 22 pilots are just the beginning. The real challenge lies in maintaining, expanding, and integrating this force into a sustainable defense doctrine. The planes must be maintained. The supply chains must be secured. The intelligence infrastructure must be strengthened. And most of all, these pilots must be protected. Trained aviators are rare and valuable targets in any war. Burkina Faso must ensure their security and their continuous development. There is also the regional dimension. Burkina Faso is not alone in this war. With the Sahel alliance, Niger, Mali, and Burkina, emerging as a new axis of military and political solidarity, the air force these pilots represent could one day be part of a unified Pan-African defense system. Imagine that. African nations, historically fragmented by colonial borders and foreign interests, now coordinating fleets, sharing air bases, training together, and flying under a single mission. African Defense by Africans. Let's not underestimate what was accomplished on this day. In a world that too often looks at Africa as a continent to be saved, aided, or managed, Burkina Faso just stood up and said, "We will save ourselves." Not through dependency, not through diplomatic pleading, but through action, through courage, through flight. So to the 22 new pilots of Burkina Faso's Air Force, we say, fly high, fly proud, and fly free. The nation watches you, Africa salutes you, and history will remember you, not just as aviators, but as pioneers of African sovereignty. The sky is no longer the limit. It is now the battlefield, and Burkina Faso just claimed its wings.